The National Youth Council did not only field a slate of young parliamentarians for their annual Youth Parliament exercise, but went a step further this year, embedding student reporters at several media houses. SALCC student Desray Desir begins our news coverage with her reporting on Tuesday's parliamentary proceedings.
I'm here outside the House of Parliament of St. Lucia, where our youth were granted the opportunity to take over the sitting for today. This is the first sitting of Youth Parliament hosted by the National Youth Council, one of the many celebrations for independence. Today's topic of debate, educational reform, one which many persons possess very strong opinions about. I will be engaging with the youth parliamentarians in order to gain their insights on the process which led them here today. I also will be interviewing the Minister for Education, the Prime Minister, and the youth leader of opposition to gain their insights into the process which led them here today and their take on educational reform. St. Lucia's House of Parliament was filled by members of the National Youth and Student Council Executive, primary and secondary school students, cabinet ministers, and opposition parliamentarians. Of course, the youth parliamentarians were in attendance, complemented by a youth speaker of the House and even a deputy speaker. Educational reform is the process of changing public education. Before the proceedings commenced, I spoke to Alan Plant, the youth representative for Castries South, who presented the motion for debate. Plant believes that there are many ways in which St. Lucia may achieve a change in public education and laid down the basic principles by which he thinks this should occur.
We believe that it must encompass holistic development in building our students. We focus on specific areas as TVET, that we know that we have most students on this island who are not academically inclined and who are technical and who can enter the career field being excellent technical workers and being in the technical field. So
Plant mentioned that young students of his constituency complained to him about the burden of common entrance, referring to it as a plague. He suggested that alternative forms of testing should be looked into.
What we have as an NYC Ministry of Education, and which was said by the last executive by the National Youth Council, was that the inclusion of an aptitude test. An aptitude test is one that grades one in accordance with skills and your personality and talent and so on. And then with those skills, those students can be included into a secondary school education that syncs with their career field when they go into secondary level education. Because I think that time that needs to stop where we have stereotyped our students because of their secondary school, and that all students on the island can learn and will learn when it comes to education reform.
During the parliamentary debate, the representative for Castries Central was passionate about her belief that our primary school curriculum should be fully Lucian, meaning it should be taught in our native tongue. She stated that our culture, which includes weaving and traditional dancing, can be taught to students from a tender age, rather than waiting until they're in Form 4 or 5. Due to the nature of the debate, an opposition stance on educational reform had to be taken. However, the leader of the opposition said that there wasn't much of a divergence of opinion between his team and his colleagues on the government side.
Of course, because at the end of the day, it is always about the people, and we are here to represent the people, of course. So if the motion speaks to working with the government to enact the necessary change necessary for the people, of course we wouldn't work with the government.
This sitting of Youth Parliament was different from what obtained with the seniors. Rather than an 11-6 split in the actual Parliament House, today's proceedings were divided almost evenly, with 9 on one side and 8 on the other. During the debate, opposition members' arguments often agreed with the government in favor of educational reform, something that is all too rare during debates of elected parliamentarians. From a reporter's perspective, one of the most prominent changes between last year's sitting and this year was the demonstration of a more structured and constructive debate. The passion was felt, but the behavior was cordial. Nobody tore up the speech of the Prime Minister, and I thought it was refreshing to note that our young people did not succumb to the pressures of being in the House of Parliament. Rather, they demonstrated very professional conduct. Reporting outside the House of Parliament of St. Lucia, I am Desray Desir, your youth reporter for Choice News.